Now, I don't go into bone development very much at all. I know a lot of instructors do it a lot more than I do. But there's two ways, and you just generally need to know the two ways in which bone is formed, in you and your kids, whatever. There's two processes for bone formation. One is called intramembranous, and the word ossification just means bone formation. There's intramembranous ossification and endochondral ossification. They're very different processes. Intramembranous ossification begins in utero, and to a certain extent, so does endochondral ossification. But this is a rapid process. Bone forms directly from embryonic tissue without anything in between. You'll see what that is in just a second. But the number of bones in the human body formed by intramembranous ossification are very few. Your skull bones, these guys up here you're going to learn tonight, the roofing bones in the skull, clavicle, and also the mandible. This one here. All the other bones in the body, all the other 200 bones or odd bones, are formed by a much slower process, which starts before birth and continues until you're finished growing, at whatever age that is. Let's say 18, but it varies, obviously. And that's called endochondral ossification. It's a slower process. When your kids were born, they were actually mostly cartilage. That's a gross exaggeration, but it's not like you could tie them in knots. Obviously, you can't do that, right? But they're not solid bone. They're mostly cartilage. And over years, the cartilage is slowly replaced by bone. And let's say by the time you're 18, you're just solid bone. It's not necessarily true because there are a few bones which continue in the ossification process until you're in your 20s. The little one here, the xiphoid process, is the last one to ossify. And I think some of the sacral bones are also really slow to ossify. But it takes a really long time. So a cartilage model is replaced by bone. And this is the process that most bone is formed by. Now, there's a very remarkable picture here in your book. I think I should know this. I think this is, I don't know how, I have no idea how these pictures are done. But this is, I think, like 10 weeks. Human fetus at 10 weeks. And this is 16 weeks. So like a month and a half, right? And you can see, even at this very early stage, you can make the outline of the ribs and some of the other bones. The skull bones are just beginning to form. Here, just 6 weeks later, the skull bones are well formed. You can see the arm bones and the ribs. The outline of those bones is formed, even though they're still mostly cartilage. Right? After birth, obviously this continues. You can watch your kids grow. It's a remarkable process. And what's really going on is the cartilage, which forms the bulk of these bones, is being replaced by a hard structure, which you know is bone. That's the reason when if you, I don't know, break you're 30 years old and, I don't know, you break your humerus. Well, you know what, go to the doctor, probably cast it up, put a pin in, whatever. Kid does it, it heals a lot more quickly because they're actively forming bone. Us old folks, you know what, we can form bone, but it takes a long time. It'll heal. The bone will continue to grow. It's not like you break a growth plate, and often bones do break at growth plates, and the new bone forms very quickly, so it heals very quickly. So yeah, it's no problem. I remember my kid when he was, I don't know how old, it was probably, I don't know, he wasn't a teenager yet, and I only broke one of his wrists